try to be as concise as possible to be cognizant of your time, but I want to cover some of the main points as to why this is an important issue and what some of the financial metrics are about that. I certainly will stay and answer any questions you may have if you think I didn't go into enough detail with this. And I have to stand here because I have to push the button. My name is Steve Agee. I'm an EMS consultant. I've been in this business since the early 70s. I was telling some folks today that I started in Oregon and my terminating license number there was 16. So I've got some time under my belt. I've been consulting now for 18 or 19 years, a lot of time with small and big companies alike, and I've traveled all over the country. Over the last 18 years as a consultant, I spent a great deal of time working for cities and counties, hospital districts, and trying to help them work through issues. I'm not a baker either, but I think I know a fair amount about ambulance services and EMS and what's important. And I appreciate the time and effort and the work that many people have put in this already, moving forward to decide how best to deal with what's going on here in Houston County. I really appreciate the fact that somebody didn't just jump out and hire the first ambulance company to walk in the door and didn't pay any attention to it. Folks sometimes forget that this is a big deal. There's not many things that a government has to deal with that's more important than the health and safety and dealing with ambulance services. And this list just shows some of the things that EMS organizations make up. It is a financial issue, it is a legal issue, it is a healthcare issue, it is a transportation issue. And sometimes organizations just think it's easy. The state's got somebody certified, let's bring them in, let's sign, and let's go. I will tell you that part of this issue has been made harder for you folks in the fact, and I've used this term and I feel comfortable using it again, is you've been given a gift, quite frankly, by East Texas Medical Center's EMS organization for as long as they've been here, because they have done a great job and provided good service, and they've charged you no subsidy. When the reality is there probably should have been some subsidy paid for quite some years. And EMS is changing across America in such a way that it's now at a point where organizations are seeing what they could bring in and use the fee revenue, and it's lower than what they're spending in the cost of putting the system on, and they're finding themselves in a situation where they have to now look at subsidy to fix that delta. Unfortunately, that puts you in a situation where you've been getting the service, I use the word for free, it's not really for free, but you've not paid a subsidy for it, and now you're looking to pay some subsidy to some provider, whether it's internal or external, to make this thing work. I was asked to come in and do a couple of phases. One was to make sure that on March 15th, at that time, you had an ambulance provider, and then to look at the long-term, medium length, and long-term fixes to this organization. I spent a lot of time, a lot of discussion with Dr. Walker and many other stakeholders in the county to talk about what their issues were and what their opinions were moving forward. As you just heard, I call this a moving target. As of this morning, we had to March 14th, but we knew we were in negotiations. As of this afternoon, we have 14 days. We're not going to get any more. We have to have another ambulance provider in place by March 14th. That's no small task. There are providers out there who I have spoken to and who have talked to the judge and who have expressed an interest that they can be ready with a basic service at the advanced life support level and be in here in that time period. But some of the decisions about who's going to be the governing entity, how's it going to be funded, have to be made rather rapidly to make sure that we have those in place so that we can then start talking to the right company under the right criteria and get them in to operate. There's some pretty standard things that EMS designers, consultants look at when they're putting together a system to make sure that they're in place and not just a haphazard approach to providing emergency medical services. These have been met pretty well for you to date. You've had a company that's provided some clinical excellence in this arena and some response time reliability, even though that's not reported and you may not know what your response times are. It's been pretty standard, and by all accounts, I don't hear a lot of complaints of people waiting for a long time to get ambulance services. Performance accountability, both the contracts that the East Texas has been working under are weak, quite frankly. They don't ask for a lot of criteria, nor do they require that East Texas provide you any data or any information on number of calls, what the majority of response time for the calls. So some of this has been done blind because they've not been required to record that information, but performance accountability is one of those things that have to be in there. And economic efficiency, it's got to be done at the right price and the right model to pay for it. And it's got to meet community expectations. We don't know what that is. We don't know whether the community looks at EMS as Superman coming out there, or whether they have a far different look at EMS. I always try to put that picture up there. That's Dr. John's love unit. I've never seen fire trucks get marked up to where people do different things with them. But you see ambulances all the time, and that's in front of an X-rated bookstore in Ames, Iowa, I think. And it just reminds me every time I show that slide that sometimes the ambulance industry doesn't have a great reputation. We don't have the 200 years of history that fire departments do. And when you look at the ambulance services, people don't know much about them. That's really my message there. People use an ambulance about 1.2 times their life. And so they never spend much time thinking about what does a good ambulance service look like? What does a paramedic do? What's an EMD do? They just don't know, and quite frankly, at 1.2 times in their lifetime, they don't need to know. But what they do need to know is that when they pick up the phone and they call 911, that somebody has made the decision to send them the right level of care at the right time, the right procedure, to get the right job done. And that's what needs to be done here. I looked at a number of different things before we start talking about who actually is going to provide the service. One is the service area definition. Here it's pretty clearly defined. It is all of Houston County except for the area covered by the Greenland ESD. It happens to be an ESD of its own that doesn't have EMS in its charter. But our service area definition is pretty easily defined, and that's good. Although I will tell you, one of the things that I looked at very early, since East Texas Medical Center also operated in Trinity County, was the possibility of a two-county operation where both counties could come together under some JPA or interlocal agreement, find a single provider, find a single contract, and work jointly to do that. Trinity County chose to go in a different direction and has already signed off with somebody else, and so it seems like an unlikely option at this point, even though there will probably continue to be mutual aid and some dual responses. There's not going to be a single agreement that covers both counties. So when we start talking about financing and revenue, I'll tell you again that it's important that the bigger mass you can provide, the more call volume you can provide, the better it is for you. It makes it easier to run the system, and it makes it easier to finance through user fees and not a big subsidy. We, however, probably lost that possibility to do that. The other is the market segments. In this area, you've got two market segments. You've got your 911 calls, and you've got your non-911 calls, which are, quite frankly, predominantly transfers out of the hospital